"Please don't make my grandpa cry anymore," the boy said quietly to the hospital director. He was 7 years old, holding a plastic sandwich bag with 4 loonies and 6 dimes inside. "I saved this from my lunch money. Is it enough to buy him one easy day?" Seth Callahan, Chief Medical Officer of Ridgemont Private Hospital in Ottawa, heard those words from behind the frosted glass of his office door. He did not move immediately. He stood very still, the way a man does when something has reached him before he had time to defend himself against it. The hospital smelled the way it always did, antiseptic and recirculated air and the faint sweetness of the gift shop flowers 1 floor below. Nothing about it had ever bothered Seth before. He had spent 11 years building this place into one of the most efficient private medical facilities in Eastern Ontario, and efficiency, to him, had always smelled exactly like this: clean, controlled, functional. He opened his door. In the hallway, Gerald Whitmore, a hospital porter who had worked the morning shift for going on 9 years, was crouched down next to a small boy Seth had never seen before. Gerald's hands were on his knees. His face was tilted toward the floor. The boy, dark hair, muddy sneakers, wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs hoodie 2 sizes too big, stood very straight, as if posture might make his offer more legitimate. Between them on the floor sat the plastic bag of coins. Seth looked at the boy, then at Gerald, then at the money. "What is this?" Seth said. It came out flatter than he intended. Gerald straightened up slowly. 9 years of early mornings and heavy equipment had done something particular to the way the man moved. Careful, deliberate, always slightly braced. He looked at Seth the way people look at approaching weather. "I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan. My grandson came by to see me on his lunch break. I told him to wait outside. I don't know how he got past the main." "Is it enough?" the boy asked again. He was looking directly at Seth. His name, Seth would learn later, was Felix. He was in grade 2 at Elmwood Public School, 4 blocks north. He took the city bus alone on Wednesdays because his mother worked a double shift at the pharmacy across town and his after-school program didn't run in December. Grandpa comes home and he doesn't eat dinner. He just sits. Mom says it's because his back hurts, but I think it's something else. Seth said nothing. Felix picked up the bag and held it out. "I don't know what a day off costs, but I've been saving since October." The hallway was quiet in the specific way hospital hallways are quiet. Not silent, but layered, sounds moving behind closed doors and down distant corridors, never quite arriving. Seth looked at the bag in the boy's hand, 4 loonies, 6 dimes, $4.60. He had approved a budget revision that morning worth $2.3 million. He looked at the bag for a long time. "Get back to your station, Gerald," Seth said. His voice was steady, professionally steady. "And take the boy to the main entrance. He'll wait there." He went back into his office and closed the door. Seth had not thought about his father in a long time. That was not an accident. His father, Douglas Callahan, had driven a city transit bus in Hamilton for 31 years. He had taken 1 sick day in all that time, the morning Seth's mother had her stroke, and he had gone in for his afternoon shift anyway because the route supervisor was short-staffed and Douglas Callahan did not leave people short-staffed. Seth had been 12. He remembered sitting in the hospital waiting room alone for 4 hours, watching the door, certain his father would come back. Douglas had come back at 11 p.m., still in his uniform, smelling of diesel and stale coffee, and he had held Seth's hand without saying anything until the doctor came out. Douglas Callahan had retired at 63 with a bad hip, a certificate from the Transit Authority, and a pension that covered his rent if he was careful. He had never once complained. That was the part Seth had spent his whole career trying to replicate, without ever quite understanding what it had cost. He stood at his office window and watched the parking lot below. After a while he pulled Gerald's personnel file. 9 years of service, clean record, 1 written commendation from a patient's family 2 years ago for staying 20 minutes past his shift to help an elderly woman find her husband's room because the volunteer desk had been unstaffed. Current shift, 5 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., 5 days a week. Wage, $21.40 an hour. Seth flipped to the attendance section. Gerald Whitmore had not taken a personal day in 14 months. Seth set the folder down on his desk and did not pick up his pen. It took him 3 days to go looking. He told himself he was doing a floor inspection. He did those periodically, unannounced, which the staff both respected and quietly dreaded. But on the 3rd morning he found himself on the basement level at 6:15 a.m., which was not a floor he typically inspected, and which happened to be where the porter stations were. He heard Gerald before he saw him. The man was moving a supply cart down the east corridor, the wheels of it catching on the uneven tile near the fire exit the way they always did. Seth had approved a work order to fix that tile 8 months ago. He made a note to follow up. Gerald moved slowly, not lazily. Seth was precise enough in his observations to know the difference. It was the slowness of someone managing something, redistributing weight, compensating. The cart was heavy. Gerald's right hand gripped the handle a fraction tighter than the left. When he reached the storage room and lifted a box from the lower shelf, the effort moved through his entire body in a way that was visible, brief, and quickly concealed. He didn't see Seth until he turned around. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Mr. Callahan," Gerald said. His voice was composed. "Gerald." Seth looked at the box, then at the man's hands. The right one was wrapped at the base of the thumb, athletic tape, the beige kind. "Neat job. How long has that been bothering you?" Gerald glanced at his hand as if noticing it for the first time. "It's nothing, sir. Old injury." "Occupational health cleared you?" "I haven't filed anything. It's manageable." Seth said, "Right," in the tone he used when something was not, in fact, right, but he wasn't prepared to say so yet. He turned and walked back toward the elevator. At the corner he stopped. "The cart wheel's on the east corridor," he said, without turning around. "I'll have maintenance look at it today." He didn't wait for a response. Back at his desk, Seth sat for a long time without opening anything. Outside his window, the sky was the particular gray of an Ottawa December, the kind of gray that sits on the city like a judgment. He thought about Felix standing in the hallway with a plastic bag of lunch money, holding it out like it was something reasonable, like it was a fair trade. He thought about Gerald not filing an injury report because it was manageable, because the alternative to manageable was unthinkable. Seth pressed the intercom. "Get me Gerald Whitmore's schedule for the rest of the week." His assistant's voice came back. "Is everything all right?" "Just get me the schedule." He called Gerald into his office the following morning. Gerald arrived 4 minutes early, which Seth noted. He was wearing his uniform, hat in hand, the way men of a certain generation present themselves when they expect bad news and intend to receive it with dignity. Seth gestured to the chair across from his desk. Gerald sat. "I'm reassigning your shift for the next 2 weeks," Seth said. "Light duties only. Filing and transit coordination on the second floor, no lifting. Maintenance will be adjusting the east corridor cart route in the meantime." Gerald was quiet for a moment. "Is this a demotion, Mr. Callahan?" "It's a medical accommodation." "I haven't filed for one." "I'm filing it on your behalf. Occupational health will follow up." Seth paused. "Your wage doesn't change." Something moved across Gerald's face that Seth couldn't immediately name. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It was more complicated than that. The face of a man recalculating something he had long since assumed was fixed. "I don't want any fuss made," Gerald said. "There won't be." Gerald nodded slowly. He picked up his hat, then, at the door, he stopped. He turned halfway. "My grandson," he said, "the money he brought." "I know about it. He's been saving since this October. He counted it out on the kitchen table every night." Gerald's voice stayed level, but something in it shifted, compressed, the way a man talks, when he's learned to hold things carefully to keep them from spilling. "He asked me once if the people I work for were good people. I told him most of them were fine." Seth said nothing. "I suppose I'll have to revise that answer," Gerald said quietly, and walked out. Seth sat at his desk for a long time after the door closed. Outside, the city went on being gray and cold and indifferent. He thought about what it meant that a 7-year-old boy had understood something about his grandfather's exhaustion that an 11-year medical career had trained Seth Callahan to categorize as a scheduling problem. He opened the building maintenance request log and began typing. The board meeting happened on a Thursday, the kind of Thursday in January when the temperature in Ottawa drops to -22 and the sky turns white and the city feels like it is being held under something heavy. Seth had not planned to bring any of it to the board, but the board brought it to him first. Terence Okafor, the board chair, arrived with a printed copy of the facility's expense log and a particular expression Seth associated with cost restructuring conversations. He set the papers on the table and folded his hands. The maintenance orders, Okafor said, the East Wing floor repairs, the ergonomic adjustments in the porter stations, the occupational health reviews you've initiated for 12 staff members. He paused. Care to explain the operational logic here? Seth looked at the papers. Preventive maintenance, human capital retention. The board's concern, said another member, Patricia Shen, who oversaw risk management, is optics. We are a private medical facility. Our donors and our patients expect certain standard of environment and staffing. When we start accommodating, and I use that word deliberately, employees who perhaps are no longer optimally suited to their roles, we introduce liability. Gerald Whitmore is not a liability, Seth said. He's a porter with an undisclosed injury who has been here 9 years without advancement, Shen said evenly. He is a very small line on a very large budget. The question is whether one small line justifies the precedent you're setting. Seth looked around the table. He thought about Douglas Callahan, driving his bus route on the day his wife had a stroke because the route supervisor was short-staffed. He thought about what 31 years of that kind of reliability costs a man, and what it buys him, and whether the certificate from the transit authority looked good on his wall. Gerald Whitmore has been here 9 years, Seth said. He has not taken a personal day in 14 months. He came in with an undiagnosed hand injury and did not file a claim because he didn't want to be seen as a problem. His 7-year-old grandson saved $4.60 in a plastic bag over 2 months trying to buy his grandfather one easy day. The room was quiet. We built this hospital on the idea that we care about human health, Seth continued. If we only mean the health of the people with insurance cards and private rooms, then we should say so plainly, and I will hand in my resignation and you can find someone else to run this place. He straightened the papers in front of him. But if we mean what we say, then Gerald Whitmore is not a liability. He is exactly the kind of person this institution should be protecting. Terence Okafor looked at him for a long moment, then at Patricia Shen, then back at Seth. The maintenance orders will proceed, Okafor said finally. The occupational health reviews will be completed by end of quarter. He picked up his pen. Is there anything else? There was not. Seth found Felix in the hospital lobby on a Wednesday afternoon in late January. The boy was sitting in one of the chairs near the main entrance, backpack on his lap, watching the revolving door. He looked up when Seth sat down across from him. You work here, Felix said. You're the one Grandpa talks about. I'm one of the ones he works for, Seth said. I'm Seth. Felix considered this. He doesn't talk bad about you, he just talks quiet. Seth was not sure he had ever been described that way before. He found he didn't have an immediate response to it. Your grandfather is going to be on lighter work for a few weeks, Seth said. His hand needs to rest. It's taken care of. Felix looked at the revolving door for a moment. Did my money help? Seth thought about the correct answer to that question. I thought about the $4.60 in the plastic bag, which was currently sitting in the center drawer of his desk, untouched. He had not been able to throw it away, and he had not been able to return it without addressing something he hadn't yet figured out how to address. Yes, Seth said, it did. Felix nodded, apparently satisfied with this. He opened his backpack and pulled out a juice box and a granola bar, the kind of after-school snack a 7-year-old assembles when no adult has had time to do it for him. He offered the granola bar to Seth with the straightforward generosity of a child who has not yet learned to calculate the cost of things. Seth took it. They sat together in the lobby while the revolving door turned and the winter light came gray and flat through the glass, and Seth ate half a granola bar and thought about his father in his bus driver's uniform, and about Gerald Whitmore arriving at 5 a.m. with taped hands for 14 months without a day off, and about all the ways an institution could be efficient and still be wrong about almost everything that mattered. The changes happened slowly, the way real changes always do, not announced, not framed as initiatives or branded as wellness programs. Seth found it more honest to just make them and let people notice on their own. The porter stations in the basement got proper ergonomic floor matting, the thick kind, commercial grade, because a man standing on concrete for 8 hours a day is absorbing damage that doesn't show up in the liability reports until years later. The supply carts got replaced with motorized assist models that management had been approving for the surgical floors for 2 years. The overnight custodial staff got access to the same employee lounge as the administrative staff, which had apparently never been the case before, a fact that embarrassed Seth when he discovered it. There was no memo, there was no all-staff email. Did Callahan actually come down to the basement last week? He overheard someone say in the elevator. Like, in person? Twice, someone else replied. I thought I was in trouble. Seth allowed himself a small private satisfaction at that, which he kept to himself because he was still, fundamentally, a very private man. Gerald Whitmore returned to full duties in late February. Seth passed him in the East Corridor one morning, and they exchanged a nod, the particular nod of two men who have arrived at an understanding without ever quite having the conversation. The tile near the fire exit had been replaced. Gerald's cart moved silently. In March, Seth did something he had not done since the first year he'd taken the CMO role, when he was still learning what the job actually required of him versus what he'd believed it would. He drove to Hamilton on a Sunday. His father was smaller than Seth remembered, which happened every time, and still managed to be a surprise. Douglas Callahan was sitting at his kitchen table with a half-finished crossword and a cup of tea that had gone cold, which seemed to be how most of his Sundays went now. He looked up when Seth came in through the back door, and his face did the thing it always did, a brief complicated brightness, cautious, like a man who has learned not to expect things. Didn't know you were coming, Douglas said. I know, Seth said. I should have called. He made a fresh pot of tea and sat down across from his father and did not talk about work. He asked about the neighbor's dog, who had apparently been getting into the green bin again. He asked about the crossword. He stayed for 4 hours, which was 3 hours longer than any visit in recent memory, and when he left, he drove back to Ottawa thinking about a boy and a plastic bag of coins, and what it means to understand too late what someone's quietly carrying. Late April arrived the way spring arrives in Ottawa, tentative, still cold in the mornings, the kind of weather that keeps offering warmth and then taking it back. The hospital courtyard had been closed for renovation since November. Seth had quietly redirected part of the facility's budget to accelerate the timeline, and on the last Friday of the month it opened again, with a proper seating area and a few raised garden beds that the occupational therapy department had been requesting for 2 years. He was reviewing procurement files when his assistant knocked. There's a boy downstairs, she said. Felix Whitmore. He says he has something for you. Seth set down his pen. Felix was in the lobby again, backpack on, Leaf's hoodie replaced by a spring jacket, a little too light for the morning temperature. He was holding a folded piece of paper with both hands, pressed flat to keep it from creasing. I made you something, he said when Seth sat down. Seth unfolded the paper carefully. It was a drawing in crayon, the hospital recognizable mainly by the large red cross Felix had drawn on the front, and 2 figures in front of it, one tall, one small. The tall one appeared to be wearing a tie. The small one was holding something that, on close inspection, turned out to be a plastic bag. Below it, in the careful block letters of a second grader, "Thank you for looking after Grandpa." Seth looked at the drawing for a long time. Grandpa smiles at dinner now, Felix said. Mom noticed. Seth folded the drawing along its original crease and held it for a moment. He had, over the course of a fairly demanding career, received a number of professional acknowledgments, commendations, performance reviews, an award from the Ontario Hospital Association that sat in a frame in the storage room behind his office because he had never gotten around to hanging it. He had not felt about any of them the way he felt about a crayon drawing with a misspelled thank you from a boy in a spring jacket. Tell your grandfather I said hello, Seth said. Felix nodded. He adjusted his backpack straps. Then, as he was heading toward the revolving door, he stopped and looked back. Did you use my 460? He asked. Not yet, Seth said honestly. Felix thought about this. You should spend it on something good, he said. He pushed through the revolving door and walked out into the pale April sunlight. Seth sat in the lobby for a few minutes, holding the folded drawing. Through the glass, he watched Felix walk down the front path toward the bus stop, small and unhurried, a kid who had somewhere to be. The revolving door slowed and stopped. The lobby was quiet. He thought about what it would mean to spend $4.60 on something good. He thought about it the whole way back to his office, and he was still thinking about it when he sat down, set the drawing carefully on the corner of his desk where he would see it, and opened the center drawer. The plastic bag was right where he'd left it. 4 loonies, 6 dimes, a little lint from the bottom of a 7-year-old's backpack. He picked it up and held it in his palm. Outside his window, the Ottawa sky had finally tentatively made its mind up about spring. The light came through at a different angle than it had all winter, and it landed on his desk in a long warm bar that reached the edge of the drawing, and something in Seth Callahan, some last cold mechanism that had been running a long time on its own, quietly, without announcement, came to rest. Not every institution deserves the people who hold it together, but every now and then, one of them figures it out in time. I keep thinking about that plastic bag, 4 loonies and 6 dimes, a kid counting coins on a kitchen table every night for 2 months because he didn't know what else to do, and doing it anyway. There's something I've come to believe about the way things unfold, not in any mystical sense, just in the plain, observable way that causes move through a life and land somewhere unexpected. Felix didn't change Seth Callahan because he said the right thing. He changed him because he did the honest thing. He walked into a building where he wasn't supposed to be, held out everything he had, and asked a simple question. That kind of integrity, the kind that doesn't calculate the odds first, has a way of moving through people whether they're ready for it or not. Seth was not a bad man before that Wednesday afternoon. That's the part I think about most. He was competent, disciplined, genuinely committed to running his institution well. But competence without paying attention to who's holding everything up, that's its own kind of failure, quiet and slow and easy to miss until a 7-year-old makes it impossible to look away. What Seth did next is what I'd call the harder thing. Noticing is one kind of courage. Acting on what you've noticed, knowing it will cost you, knowing the board will push back, knowing the system you've spent a career building will resist, that takes something different. It takes the willingness to be wrong about what you thought mattered, and to say so plainly even when no one's forcing you to. He didn't frame it as generosity. He didn't announce it. He just quietly fixed the tile, replaced the carts, walked down to the basement twice in 1 week. That restraint is its own form of wisdom. It says, I'm not doing this to be seen doing it. I'm doing it because it's the right shape for a place that claims to care about people. And Gerald, 9 years of 5 a.m. shifts, 14 months without a personal day, a hand wrapped in athletic tape that he called manageable because the alternative was unthinkable. The resilience in that word, manageable, is the kind that doesn't get celebrated anywhere. It doesn't show up in performance reviews. Nobody hands you a certificate for it. Gerald just kept showing up, kept doing the work with precision and care, and trusted that somewhere in the institution there was someone paying enough attention to eventually notice. He was right, just barely, and later than it should have been. I think about Felix asking if his 460s was enough, and Seth saying yes, honestly, because it was, not because it covered any cost, because it cracked something open that needed cracking. The coins are still in the drawer, probably. Some things you hold on to not because they have monetary value, but because they remind you of the moment you finally understood what you were actually supposed to be doing. That's the real currency in this story. Not the money, not the boardroom victory, not even the crayon drawing with the misspelled thank you. It's the choice to stay present long enough that a child's honesty can reach you, to have the good sense to let it.